Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 31 of Podcast of Five Rings, your source of enlightenment in the realm of video games, tabletop, anime, film, and tech. Each episode of Podcast of Five Rings releases Monday mornings on iTunes and Soundcloud, now topic by topic, day by day on YouTube, with the full video releasing on Friday. To catch updates about the podcast or for other news, give us a follow on your social media platform of choice, listed in the description below. I'm your host, GM, and overseer of Podcast of Five Rings, Obsidian. Joined tonight by the wall. Well, not fall, Tetsuo.
I'm here this week.
He's here. He's not sick anymore. He was dying.
It's horrible.
It was that taint, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens, man. You gotta, vet your ice. Make sure there's not the Oni eggs inside of it. It'll get you every time.
Every time.
First time it happens, you won't make the mistake again. You know those little black specks in your ice on the little
Oh my
That's
god,
what it is.
dude.
Those are called your pupils.
Good god.
As the Dark
Nothing
Fortune
secret.
Duelist meta.
Yar.
He's a pirate today. Talk like a pirate day was like 3 months ago.
Arr. Yeah, it was. It was a long time ago.
Yeah. Right up there with Donut Day and I don't know, the other awesome thing called it.
Day.
Man, free Donut Day is the bomb.
You know, I never ever take advantage of those stuff. Like, talk like a pirate day. I'll always say yar every now and then, but I never actually go to any place that's having deals. Like, if you talk like a pirate or you wear something like a pirate, you can get something for free. I never take advantage of any of those things.
No one around me does that. That should be like a seafood thing.
The only one that I do is World Whiskey Day.
See, I don't even know. World of Whiskey. It sounds like World of Wills or something like that.
Wait,
World
Whiskey Day?
Whiskey. Yeah, so world whiskeys are like any whiskey that's not Scotch or distinctly American, like Canadian, Japanese. Those are all like your world whiskeys. And there's a day, World Whiskey Day. I forget which day it is. I think it's
It's
May.
World. WHIRLED.
No. WORLD.
Okay, World. Okay, I was about to say, what is a World Whiskey?
World. And a lot of liquor stores will have huge discounts if it's a world whiskey as opposed to a Scotch or a bourbon or something like that. So that's the only one of those type of things I take advantage of is the World Whiskey Day, and it's in May.
I should do that. I had no idea.
Yeah, not
I
everybody
love me
does
a
it,
good whiskey.
Yeah.
but I don't know if these two store chains are around y'all, but ABC and Total Wine both do it. So
Man,
No, we don't get.
whiskey is very much a you cannot go cheap on your whiskey or it is god awful.
No.
you can. Yes, you can. Yes,
No,
you can.
but you shouldn't.
You can,
There's
but
some-
man,
You can, but you shouldn't.
There's some good. Well, okay. Let me rephrase. Canadian and American whiskeys, you can do it with. Don't do it with your scotches.
Okay.
that might be a better
All right.
clarification.
All right, I'll agree with that. I will agree with that.
Because Old Granddad is only $10 in this area, and it's bottled in bond and is a straight bourbon, so it's aged for at least 2 years. So it's only $10, $12.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
yeah, that's not. And if you can't tell already, the resident wildcard Mal's not with us. He's made like a ninja and poofed, gone elsewhere. I don't know where he is. He said he wouldn't be here, so he's not.
Yeah,
here.
he just said he wouldn't be here. Don't ask about it.
Yep.
Very cryptic.
Yeah, he
My
very
brain twice
specifically
said
said,
help.
"If you ask me, you'll live to regret it." And I shouldn't have
kill
been
you.
surprised Mal said that because he is the resident wildcard. But
He is.
Yeah.
so he'll probably be back next week,
Yeah.
or he's gone. The Geostorm got him. Man, I said this last week. I wanted to talk about that movie, but we're not going to talk about it.
One day.
Words cannot be said. It's a movie that needs to be experienced, though.
Yeah.
No, go on. What are you going to say, Ted?
I had a comment, but I'm gonna save it for later because
All right.
it goes. Yeah.
All right, we'll get. We'll talk about
We'll
that
get
later.
there eventually.
Yeah. All right. Well,
We will get there.
in lieu of that, why don't you tell us about your topic, Tetsuo? You were up first tonight.
All right. Well, I don't remember if it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I
believe
talked
2.
about the 10K. Was it 2 weeks? So it was the last time I was on.
Yep.
Yeah, it had
Because
to
Meta
be-
was not here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I talked about the game 10 Candles. this past weekend, I was able to run a game of 10, the game of 10 candles that I was talking about that I was going to run. And I thought I would just give my report, our experiences of the game and how it went over.
Did you use real, authentic candles?
Lights. I will say, if you have to use tea lights, go out and buy them. Do not go ask your mother-in-law for tea lights because she will probably have the ever-burning one. You guys get to the 4th hour, you're like,
well, there's your problem.
No one ever dies. It kind of defeats the purpose of the game.
That was like we were like going up, like, why are these candles not going out? And so finally, my wife was like, nobody's dying, and blows out a candle.
Oh my god.
Oh, it's amazing.
All right, so what is 10 Candles? In case people have not listened to that episode.
10 Candles is a tragic horror RPG called tragic horror as opposed to survival horror in the sense that all the characters will perish before the end of the story.
Which I love.
You don't have your characters survive. It's not really designed. It's designed as a one-shot. It's not designed for continuous play. And the way that it handles horror is similar to the game Dread, where you actually have a Jenga tower instead of rolling dice. This one uses external things to cause your tension to rise, and in this case it's a set of 10 candles, and if you couldn't tell by now, you don't want those candles to go out, and if they do, the story progresses. Specifically, the way that dice rolls work, the players have a pool of 10 dice, 1 die for every candle that's lit, and they just have to roll more 6s than the GM to maintain narrative control of the situation. For every candle that goes out, the GM gets 1 of those dice. So as the story progresses, eventually the GM has all 10 dice and the players have none, and therefore the GM gets to kill off the players. It was really interesting. I will say that so one of the core things again is that if a candle goes out for any reason, narrative progresses and the GM gets a die. Excuse me. Accidentally blows out a candle, if somebody, hits the table too hard and a candle goes out, accidentally blows a candle, whatever the case is, that furthers the story. And so the players themselves are very tense the whole time because they're like, I don't want these tiny because they're supposed to be tiny tea lights, and you're not supposed to put them in those little things that kind of protects them. They're supposed to just be sitting out. So any little thing may blow them out. So that's how it kind of maintains the tension a little bit. And it actually worked pretty well. Conceptually, I was thinking it would work well, but I was a little hesitant to see if it would maintain the tension in the same way that the horror game was kind of going towards. But I think it really did, at least with my group.
So what was
we did have a couple?
Oh, go on. Sorry. Keep going, Teds.
I was just gonna go to the next point, so you can go ahead and ask.
Oh no, I was gonna say, what was your kind of setup for your game? What was everyone playing and stuff? Because I know everyone writes down a strength, if I remember correctly, and a weakness, and you pass it to the right and the left, respectively. And then come up with your character.
And those are going to be things like your strength is a strength of character. So I'm brave, or I don't back down easily. Something along those lines. Whereas your vice is going to kind of be, it can be a weakness, but it can also be a vice, again, in the more traditional terms of alcohol or drugs, or as one of the characters we had, an insatiable desire for chocolate. So
yeah, but who doesn't
gotta have chocolate?
Really?
Yeah, well, and how those come into play, and you have 2 other cards that are hope, which essentially is something that'll happen, and it makes it galvanizes you to face this dark threat. And then the last card is I've seen you blank, which is essentially what your character would do in the pit of despair. So like I've seen you kill somebody to survive, or I've seen you steal from those that are worse off than you, just so that way you could, survive. So something along those lines. And so as you play, if you don't roll, so the other thing about the dice is, in between those candles going out, anytime you roll a 1, the GM temporarily gets those dice until the end of the scene. In other words, until the candle goes out. So he could have all the dice on, scene 2, just because you keep rolling 1s. If you fail a roll, you can burn one of your cards by lighting it on a candle. And again, this is where things get tense, because you're picking up an index card and thrusting it into a candle. If you do that too fast or too wrong, you might, blow out the candle with your, index card. But you burn the card, and you get to re-roll any 1s that you rolled during that time.
Oh, nice.
It has to make sense in the narrative. So if your thing is that, so the other thing is you shuffle the cards and you put them in order, so you can only use the card that's on top of your stack. And at the beginning of the game, one person has to have their I've seen you, and another person has to have their thing of hope. Mm-hmm. But nobody else can have those two. Everybody else will be a vice or a virtue. And so if it's, chocolate is on top, but you guys are in the boiler room, unless you I don't know, maybe you've already established that your character's carrying armfuls of chocolate, chances are you're not going to be able to burn that card to get that reroll. Unless you argue for some reason this is the boiler room under the kitchen, and next door there's chocolates and I can smell the chocolates. It's just something like you just have to make it make sense as to why you can burn it to get a reroll. But once you burn it, it's gone. Obviously, the card's aflame. So, and if at any time all of your cards are burned, your character's dead.
So what was your big monster in the shadow and the kind of setup for your game?
Yeah, what were they facing off against?
So the setup of the game is 10 days ago, all of the stars went out of the sky, including the sun. Well, and then 10 minutes later, disappeared of light as well. Mm-hmm. And then 5 days ago, they appeared. And the GM takes control of them, this creature of the darkness, that your players are running against. As I said earlier, with the cards, whenever you write them, you alternate passing to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. But the two players that sit next to the GM, when it comes to the hope and the despair cards, they will actually write. They both will write a truth about them. So they kind of know a little bit more than everybody else does. The only thing that everybody else knows is that they are afraid of light.
Yeah.
That's the baseline for the game. And in my case, my players wrote, one of them wrote that they are trying to harvest our brains to power their machines. And the other one wrote that they are totally immune to Earth-based weapons. Which kind of was because they were shadow people, so guns weren't really going to be working on them anyway.
Gotcha.
Well, then just use lightning-based weapons. Gosh.
Exactly. Well, so
stun guns ahoy.
The setting of the game, they had gotten on a cruise ship before all the lights had gone out 10 days ago. So they're just adrift in the sea. The ship has sinks. The engines have gone out. They're running on generator power that's only flickering the lights in the hallways. They're just adrift at sea. People have started to hold themselves up in rooms, assuming they haven't already been slaughtered by them. And so that's where my players started. Mm-hmm. Aboard the ship. They were just kind of this ragtag group of people who were just hoping to go on a cruise, and this sea tour turned out worse than Gilligan's did. But they
it was the wrong kind of 3-hour tour, huh?
But they being the capital T, the bad guys, they had like the other thing is because you're supposed to be super, super vague. So I only had like super vague ideas about them and kind of built them as we went along.
Yeah.
Whatever was the most scary thing for the situation they were currently in was what they would suddenly manifest those abilities.
Gotcha.
So like there was one point where they were trying to get up to the upper deck so they could at least like see out into the ocean and possibly get on a lifeboat, and they start climbing the stairs. And then they find themselves on the floor that they just came up from. And they went back downstairs. Like I was kind of planning for them to keep going up the stairs and the things just slightly change, but they were just like, oh, nope, this is the same floor. We're going back down now. We're not going to go up there and mess with that. Like,
nope, not JPEG.
Nope, we've seen this before.
Nope. And they just kept doing that everywhere, so I just gave them more nope moments as we went along. Well, though, because it had this moment of just continuous, ever-encroaching despair and that terror. But again, because the lights were going out, there was still this like bit of optimistic hope of maybe this next door will be fine. Yeah. Maybe this next door will be fine.
Who was the first victim?
They actually all died at the same time.
Oh,
TPK.
Yeah, I was impressed with them. Eventually did get up to the deck and jumped off the ship and landed in the water and turbulence and everything. And then as they finally felt washing up on the shore, they were in the engine room, which was kind of the heart of darkness in this ship. And then they were descended upon by 1,000 shadows.
There you go.
That was kind of how the story ended.
That'll do it. That's a fitting end for the last candle going out. And it's just darkness. There's nothing else.
Just because I like watching it. Like, it was the one in front of me, and I'm just kind of watching it starting to flicker, and I'm like, it's about to go out. And so it was like, I was trying to describe that in such a way where it would time well. And so it's like, and then as you, it's the pacing of that last sentence was really bad because I was trying to time it with the candle. Yeah. So it flopped on his face. But the point still went across.
Yeah.
And everybody had a fun time. So I'm glad
that's cool.
That.
Actually sounds really interesting. A game where everybody kind of goes in knowing that they're gonna probably die. They're gonna die at the end of it.
Yeah. I think my favorite scene, there was one point, I don't remember which room there. I think they were going into the cafeteria, and they saw a light on the other side of the cafeteria hallway, and the voice that spoke back to them was the voice of this woman that they know had already died. Mm-hmm. And one of the girls going with us, she's like, nope, that is not what it is, because I say that's not, so therefore it's not. Nope. And so she started, every single time she would go to her, she's like, nope, I say it's not that, so nope, it's not that. Nope, I refuse to accept it. And so because she started doing that, it just slowly started to become more and more, is this, and are they just slowly going insane? Is all this actually what's happening? Which was really interesting, because I didn't plan for that. The players just kind of slipped that in, and it added to the horror aspect.
Huh.
While still also being funny, because it was very comical the way she was just like, I reject your reality and substitute my own. That was kind of...
Yeah, it's a very it-esque, for lack of a better word, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it does feel very it-esque.
And that's the thing I think I like about it, because you can do, I've seen them do it pretty much as a full-on zombie apocalypse. Them just through some of the players that I've watched. Sometimes I've seen it as just aliens. Other times, eldritch horrors, portals to hell opening. I've seen lots of different ways to take it, and I like it because, again, the only hard and fast genre is tragic horror. So you can kind of do whatever you want with the bad guys and totally change the tone. Totally change the tone and just kind of shift the game while still keeping it what it is, which I really liked, because a lot of horror games tend to already be entrenched in a specific genre. Call of Cthulhu is Cthulhu. Anything zombie is going to be just zombie oriented. it's very free form and allows you to kind of do with horror whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, well, here's what I think the game does well. I mean, first off, I haven't played it, so I can't really say for sure, but just based off what you've said about the game, we've kind of talked about it a few times on the podcast. So horror is like a very hard thing to do, and it's a hard game to run as a GM because first off, it's not like your players have any like visual context to what's going on. It has to be very atmospheric, and also player characters are just kind of generally badasses anyways in games. There's who aren't like afraid of this stuff, but the built-in tension of the candles and like everyone knowing they're going to die anyways, and you're not like a really super powerful character. Anyways, I think that the whole design of the game lends itself more to that horror aspect and makes it a lot more effective.
Yeah, I think
I agree with that a lot.
The idea of just going right in and knowing that you're going to die, so there's no point in trying to pretend to be this like powerful badass character, or at least larger than life. I think helps with that too. Because I mean, like as you stated before, one of the biggest problems with running anything horror is just that it really does reside on audio visual cues. That's a very big part of horror. You have to really drown yourself in it, and that means kind of subverting some of your senses to something that ultimately isn't going to be there because it's some guy across the table telling you what you're going to do. So it's hard to really get into that mood. But this game, at least it sounds like, because of what you're doing, you're going in, you already know what's going to happen at the end of the day. So there's no point in trying to play something that's beyond that. You already know the ending. How you get there is where it brings fun into play.
And that reminds me, there was one key important thing that we did skip, and that is at the very, very beginning of the game, you take out your phone or whatever recording thing you want to use, and you actually record everybody's final moments before you start the game. So they don't even know exactly how they're going to die, and they're already making their last tape recording that they're leaving for some survivor to find at a later point.
That's really cool.
That would be really cool if you somehow were able to get it to that point for each and every one of them to literally repeat their deaths.
Exactly. But so I kind of skipped it because first off, we were a little bit I wouldn't say pressed for time exactly, but essentially we had a few of our other married friends over, and one of the couples have a
Have a what?
Have a
August, cat. And so they brought the child with them.
Oh, they had a baby,
which actually worked because the lights were out, and so the baby went to sleep. But every so often would start to cry at the most creepy moments. And so the baby
that's good.
Was able to,
creepy as fuck.
It was great. My cat, of course, was totally playing into the whole "what was that scaring sound we just heard?"
Yeah.
But one of the drawbacks, one of the things I think that it does to kind of subvert itself in what it's doing, is because everybody knows they're going to die, as the game draws on, the players get a little bit less interested, but I guess less invested in the game. Like early on, everybody was throwing things out. They were really getting involved. They were, do we do this? Do we do this? I don't want to go that way, But then towards the end, everybody was kind of like, I don't know. What do you guys want to do? Wherever,
I guess that would be a problem. Is that on one hand, you kind of get rid of the larger than life because you know the ending, so there's no point in trying to do something that's going to make you seem impossible for you to die or make you greater than you are because you're going to die at the end of the day. But a part of knowing that, part of a story and getting somebody invested is figuring out what's going to happen next. But if you're getting to that point where it's getting close to the end, and you already know what's going to happen, I could definitely see where the investment of people starts to falter because you're getting to that point and there's really not much more to explore. You kind of know how it's going to play out.
And that's when, as a GM, with this game specifically, as a GM, you kind of step in. And I realized a lot of the lion's share of the GM work was at the beginning just setting things up. And then at the end, just kind of tying those loose ends. Because eventually everybody kind of gets to the point where it's like, okay, I know I'm going to die here soon. I want to do some stuff, but I don't really know what else there is to the story to explore. I feel like I've explored everything in my character. So at this point in time, I think I'm done. And so that's when, a character, quote unquote, accidentally sneezes and blows out a light. You know, that kind of stuff kind of happens. But everybody, like, you know, I as a GM, or, you know, if you're playing the game in general, don't be a douche and be the guy that, oops, I accidentally did it, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
But when you can tell that everybody's kind of getting to that point, it works better. Or at the very least, you can see everybody's starting to get to that point. You just do one, and then you just kind of are like starting to accelerate the time frame. And I don't know how much, again, that was just because we had these extra duty long burn tea lights. That also may have been part of it. Because if they were regular tea lights, people may have been dying sooner.
Well, the GM just keeps not having 10 dice to roll.
Yeah.
How about that? We're just going to breeze right through this boat.
Well, because like the other funny thing was, like, even when they were rolling tons of one, like there was one point, I think it was like round scene 2 or 3, where they had 8 or 7 dice to begin with, but at the end I had 8 or 7 or whatever the number was. They only had a couple, and I'm still rolling no 6s, and they're rolling a bunch of, like, all their dice are 6s. And I'm like, all right, well then,
statistical odds don't make sense.
The monster again. And
yeah, I think that might have been the problem, is that, like, you'd probably have to run it again with actual tea lights, but it sounds like because nobody was dead and they'd all kind of had the chance to explore their character, I think a part of it ultimately, I keep saying I think it's a part of, but ultimately the end of the tension, knowing how you're going to die, does kill off tension later on, but it helps kind of define that a character that's not going to go above and beyond being what they are, a very mortal character. I think it would help if people were able to die off earlier, though, as you noted, because at that point, that would put the tension on what would my character explore. Because if you're really playing this character to explore and try new things, if your character dies off really early, it's going to suck, because then that means you couldn't, explore everything about your character.
Well, and then two, your character only dies when all of your cards, like, despite everything else that's going on, your character only dies when either the last candle goes out or you burn all of your cards.
Yeah.
Which, again, that's your character sheet. So if you don't burn through all your cards, you don't get to fully explore your character. But if you do, you kind of have hit all the big points.
No, but isn't there, like, but the way I'm understanding is, like, isn't it the point where the GM can eventually force a situation where you're kind of screwed no matter what?
Yeah, but that's when the last candle's going out, essentially.
You can't. So would that mean that a player technically can never die until they get to that last candle?
Yeah, and that's what kind of happened with us, because we had, I think they only burned, because we had 5 players, and I think 5 players. I think we only burned through 4 of our index cards.
Huh.
Yeah, like there was one person who didn't burn a single card. Granted, that was the mother of the baby, and so there were times when she was, going into the adjacent room to take care of the baby, but she could hear and was still giving input, so that too may have been part of it. But part of it was they didn't, because of the way the dice were rolling, they didn't have reasons to really burn through cards, and they were maintaining narrative control. Because again, this is a very narrative-based game, so they were maintaining a lot of narrative control.
Well, like, what my question is more is, like, if the GM gains narrative control and a person is down to their last card, is it possible for the GM with narrative control to force the player into a situation where, regardless, if they don't burn the card, they're screwed, or if they do burn the card, they're screwed? Or is that just not possible?
He dropped.
He died.
There he is.
He's alive.
Sorry, I don't know what Discord did.
Okay, so what I was asking was, is it possible, because I don't know if you heard my question or not, but is it possible that if the GM has narrative control, can they essentially end up forcing a player into a position of, if you don't burn the card, you're screwed, and if you do burn the card, you're screwed? Essentially, damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Yes, but with the caveat of the
Cut off there, Tets.
Yeah, you cut off.
You can do that, but kind of more with. Am I cutting off?
No, I can hear you.
No, I gotcha.
Discord showing me red bars and saying I'm disconnected.
When you came back, it was like a sound.
Like your cat had punched you in the gut or something.
Yeah.
No, it was a throat. It was a throat punch. No, but yes, you can do that, but until they do burn, because if you have narrative control, that means that they did not beat you. So you may entice them to try to burn that last card to at least, help out their teammates, or to choose not to. But then it's kind of one of those, there's fates worse than death. And so that's kind of where the creativity of being a GM in this game kind of really can make or break it. Because if the GM's all just about, well, here's a whole bunch of monsters and you're going to die from monsters because monsters roar, it dimensional horror, I guess. Yeah. But if you're building on, not only there's these monsters, then there's this kind of questioning psychosis, and then you have a question of some spirituality involved, and then there's this and that, and you start adding these things, and maybe the other players are out to get you, and you start to heap on other things, you get this multi-dimensional fear. And so you can give them something that's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, without it being the threat of dying.
If I was a player, it'd be more like how am I going to use these cards and stuff to have a cool moment before my for lack of a better term, candle goes out.
That's really goes out, but that technically does mean that a player could just play a right bastard, and who never does anything and never burns their cards because they technically will never die or be in a situation where they feel that any fate could really affect them because they'll still have cards.
Right. And again, that kind of can happen, but you can encourage them as the GM. And so one of the things I did was I did sit my players down beforehand, and I kind of explained to them the way the game was going. Because you do create the characters collaboratively, and as they complete some of the cards, you only light a few of the candles, so you kind of stagger lighting of the candles, and that helps with the time frame. But I was also taking some of that opportunity to kind of be like, okay, guys, look, part of this is you guys need to try to burn your cards, you need to try to do this, you need to try to do this. Don't be the hero where I'm just going to sit on my cards so that way I have a stock of these quote-unquote points that I can, spend sometime later. Because again, the burning of the card, all it lets you do is re-roll ones. It's not really going to save you. The saving grace, if you will, is just that if you have one remaining, you'll make it to the last candle.
Okay, so you really should.
But that's not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, you should.
It kind of defeats the purpose of playing the game.
Yeah. Okay, that's really what I was trying to figure out. Is if that really defeats the purpose, and if it leads to that, then yeah, definitely sitting down with your players beforehand, letting them know that yeah, you can do this. Yeah, sure, you can make it to the last candle, but the point is to create a cool story.
It's not the fun of the game.
Yeah, because you're gonna die no matter what. So why bother sitting on them if you're just gonna die at the end?
Kind of the whole, the rule number 2, rule number 3 of RPGs in general. Everybody should sit down and discuss what they're expecting out of the game before you play it.
Yeah, that's
so it kind of goes with that. But the other thing that I found, and again I shared with them at the beginning, was that mechanically speaking, for those players that are more mechanically minded, you have the biggest chance to get the most bang for your buck by burning the cards early. If you save them till later, you're not
as effective.
You're not saving as much dice, because all you're doing is re-rolling them. It doesn't even guarantee you'll keep narrative control. You just re-rolling any ones you've rolled. So as your dice pool shrinks, the less and less effective those cards become at helping you and your friends. So sitting on your whole stack of them to the end of the game, that's not exactly going to be very fun.
Yeah, it's not going to really benefit you anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I'm glad you guys had fun with that. I wish there was a way that, because we talked about this when we did the episode. Yeah, we would have had to get a table and a webcam and fill the cameras if we were going to do that for a monthly mod. But hey,
I would love to do a horror game, but unfortunately, just because of where we're at, there's really no way to get that into any solid place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
everybody have to swear that they turned out all their lights and turned off any sounds, and Yeah.
We had our own horror story. We went through the game we didn't completely understand in October. So, oh my gosh.